So in today's video, we're gonna actually, since we've learned a decent bit of Java, let's try and expand our kind of use cases and knowledge by looking at the Java documentation. So Java has an extensive class and sort of SDK or JDK library. Today we're going to find out basically how to read it and how to do stuff if you want to, so normally we don't kind of, when we program, we don't actually go and write everything ourselves. We actually try and sort of stand on the shoulders of giants, right? So these guys have written a lot of code and we try to reuse it. All that code is generally packaged into what is known as a standard library. So let's go for it. Okay, so I'm going to open the standard library. So that's, if you want that, you just say JDK 14 API docs, and you'll get something that says something like this, where it has 14 and API in it, right? So you can get all of this kind of stuff, right? And if you click on the overview, you will get to stuff where it says all modules and stuff. So we haven't spoken about modules yet. We shall later, but for now, I just wanted to show you how to get here, right? So Java has an extensive collections library, right? So what does that mean? Just like we've studied about, let's say, int array a equals new int 1 2 3, right? And sorry, there we go. And for example, you can use a for each int x. I'll just format this a bit. I'm gonna say s out x, right? If I run this code, it should print out all the values in this array, right? So in the array is one type of collection, you can say. Java has a lot of other types of collections which are also built into the standard library, so you don't have to create them on your own, right? So we're going to find out how to use them, or at least one or two of them, and let's see how that works. Okay, so one of the standard library collections is called array list. Okay, so all you do is search. So let me do that again if that was a bit fast. So I say array, and then you get all of these kinds of hits here, right? So I'm going to say array list, and if you see here, this class array list, okay, it is part of the package java.util, right? So we know how to create our own packages. Java has created, or the creators of Java basically have created a lot of classes for us to reuse, okay, and they've packaged them up in packages of their own choosing, right? So you will notice that there are a lot of packages that start with this java dot, right? And everything in java.base is actually, or sorry, java.lang is actually included for us, so we don't have to bother about it, right? So in this case, there's this library, this class called array list. Okay, it's a generic class. We'll come to what that means a little bit later, but for now I wanted to just show you how to kind of use these things even at this stage, right? So if you look at this documentation at the top, it shows you a nested field on constructor method, and then you can get details of all of these, right? So nested means that you can create a class within a class. Okay, a field is the kinds of things that we were saying, like, for example, when you had a box, you say int width would be one of the fields of the box class. Constructors we work through, and methods we work through, right? So if we want to create an array list, we can just use this constructor here. So if you click on constructor, it'll take you directly to the constructor section, and it'll give you all the constructors that you can use. So for now, we'll use this first one, which is the simplest. So let's say I say var array list equals new array list, right? And because this is a generic type, okay, we have to put a value of what kind of thing we're going to store in this list. So what we're going to say is we're going to say store strings, right? So we're going to say array list string. Okay, now how do you get things into an array list? When it was an integer, when it was an array, normal array, all you did was there was a literal syntax. So you would say a equals, and you could actually do this 1 comma 2 comma 3, right? You could do stuff like this, but unfortunately for the class array list there is no literal syntax. Okay, so how do you get things into it? So for that, all you do is you come to the documentation. So this is one way of doing it. You come to the documentation, click on method, and then scroll through the methods. Now usually when you have a container, one of the things you could do is you could push stuff into it, or you could add stuff into it, and this kind of follows like sort of natural language, right? Like what you would normally do for a container, right? So in this case we say that they have this thing here and this thing here. Don't worry about what this E stands for right now. We'll come to that also a little bit later. Okay, so here I could say array list dot add, and if you notice, it already completes for me. It says string. The reason it says string here is because when we created the array list, we said we're going to create it to contain only string data types, right? So I'm going to say add, and I'm going to say ABC, and then I'm going to say array list dot add def, right? Now given this data structure array list, what's one of the most obvious things you can do? You can kind of iterate through all the elements, and so I'm going to try this out. String s, right? I'm going to say, I don't know why it does this, but I don't like that formatting. Here we go. And I'm going to say print out all the values in there. So let's run this, and it prints out all the values that you have in there, right? So now actually there are lots of things you can do in an array list, right? So you can do all of, so let's say for example I did that and then I wanted to clear the list, right? Because I wanted to do something else with it. I could say dot clear, right? And now if I print out everything in the array list, I should get nothing. So let's try it. So this ABC and DEF are from here, and here, because we've cleared it here, right, I get nothing. Okay, now in this array list, I was just using array list as an example to show you the kinds of things you can do by reading the documentation in online. Okay, another useful class that you have is, let's say for example you want to find out how much like for example how much of RAM you have in the system, or how many CPU cores you have in the system, things like that, right? So Java has a built-in class for that too. It's called runtime, right? So this class is part of java.lang. Okay, so that means that this runtime class is actually already included in your environment when you start coding. Okay, and this class has a method called available processors, right? But how do you create an instance of this class? Because now, so the reason I wanted to show you runtime is because when you come here, you see it has no constructor. So how do you create an object of this class runtime, right? Because you need that to run this method, because this method is a instance method, right? It's not a static method where I could have used the class name and called it. I have to have an object to call this available processors method, right? So all I do is I'll click on I can go to all methods, and since there's no constructor here, there must be a way to create a runtime. So how do you know that? You just look at this column and see whether there's a data type called runtime, and then there's a corresponding method, and this method is static, right? So if I clicked on static here, it will filter by all the static methods, so it's much faster, right? So I could say, for example, so we don't need this guy anymore. Let me see, let me do this. Runtime equals runtime dot get runtime. Okay, so this actually will give me a runtime object as this annotation shows. Okay, now given that, I could say runtime dot available processors. So let me print this out, s out, and put a comment, put a string here. So I would say total CPUs equals this. Now let me run this, and it says total CPUs equals 12, right? And you can see that I actually, since I'm running Linux, I can show you, right? So it says that I've got 12 processors. So actually I've got 6 processors which are hyper-threaded, and it shows up as 12 processors, right? But essentially it's the same thing. Now all of this stuff I could do just by learning how to read this documentation. First, I would have to learn how to sort of code in Java, and we've done that up to now, right? Except for generics, which we'll do next. But once you've got this kind of, you've understood a lot of the previous videos, you can actually now start jumping into the standard documentation. And this is of course for 14, and there'll be a similar path when 15 comes out, and there's a path for 13 and 12 and 11 and all these other versions of Java, right? So I encourage you guys to kind of like go to the overview. Right now, don't worry about modules. In fact, don't worry about any of these modules. All you do is click on the base module, and you'll get to a set of packages. And the class that we were just talking about, runtime, is in this java.lang package. Packages should be fairly clear to you. So if you notice, there's a class called runtime somewhere here. There you go, right? So in this way, you kind of get familiar. So not only do you sort of write Java, but you also kind of start to read other people's Java, right? And one of the best ways to do that is to read these standard libraries. This is the much nicer way of kind of doing it. Okay, so in this video, I sort of wanted to do this because soon in the next video I make, we'll go into generics, and we will need to look at this documentation. So I would say play around with this kind of stuff, and then I'll see you in the next one. Okay, thank you.